In August of 1963, the civil rights leader, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., stood before a crowd of thousands in Washington, D.C. He made one of the most iconic speeches in modern human history by sewing together 4 simple words. "I have a dream," he declared. And one of those dreams was that his 4 little children would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. When I myself was a girl, I learned that dictate in a slightly paraphrased version. Judge not a man by the color of his skin, but by the content of his character. And it is somewhat surreally that nearly 60 years since Martin Luther King's speech, I find myself here to do just that. I am judging boys and men by the contents of their characters, and I am dismayed to have to report that I find millions and millions of them to be sorely lacking in this department. Girls and women have all the same troubles that we ever had, to some greater than or lesser than degree, depending on how the winds are blowing or where the bombs are dropping. Only now we face a seemingly insurmountable tsunami of dystopian troubles. For instance, we are living our lives face to face and cheek to cheek with the first 3 generations of boys and men raised on a constant diet of pornographic images. These boys and men have access to these images 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so long as they have an internet connection and a device with a screen. These images include child rape, bestiality, snuff films, incest. They include violent, degenerate, and disgusting acts. These boys and men, so full of themselves and pornography, that if you could wring out their sexually saturated psyches, what would issue forth would be a poison as toxic as the hemlock poured in Hamlet's father's ear. And when not consuming pornography, these boys and men may well be playing hyper-realistic, hyper-violent, and hyper-misogynistic video games. When not watching pornography or playing games, they may well be listening to a genre of music in which girls and women are regularly referred to as bitches and hoes. These boys and men are joined by a different cohort of boys and men. Sometimes the lines are blurred, but not always. These boys and men are joined by boys and men who feel it is entirely appropriate to refer to themselves as girls and women. And society has indulged this delusion and fantasy simply because they are boys and men. These men are in our women's prisons, our rape shelters, our domestic abuse houses. These boys are in our girls' sports, in their bathrooms, and in their changing rooms. There are so many bad actors in this department, it is difficult to choose just one. And yet, I have managed to do that. I have one bad actor in mind in particular. Eddie Izzard. I have a bone to pick with you. Eddie Izzard, you are the kind of man who would play Hamlet on a sultry summer's evening and then steal the role of sweet Ophelia for the rainy Sunday matinee. Eddie Izzard, you are the kind of man who says he can switch from boy mode to girl mode as easily as I can turn a light switch from off to on. Eddie Izzard, you call yourself a girl, while around the globe girls are being trained to believe that they can be born in the wrong body. These girls will hardly resemble their grandmothers once they are finished with their course of off-label Lupron, their testosterone regime, their cosmetic double mastectomy, and the harvesting of flesh from an arm or a back or a thigh so that it may be rolled into a tube and surgically attached to their groin so that they can make their life's dreams come true. Their dreams are not to walk on the face of Mars, or to cure cancer, or to become the next Frida Kahlo or Georgia O'Keeffe. Their dreams are to pee standing up. And still, Eddie Izzard, you call yourself a girl while you sleep in London. Girls in Afghanistan are atomized by deranged suicide bombers. Men who blow the girls' healthy bones and eager minds into a bloody mist simply because the girls tried to become literate women. Eddie Izzard, you call yourself a girl while in Iran, heartbroken mothers go into icy cold morgues to collect the abused bodies of their beloved daughters. These young women were arrested, tortured, and raped the night before their execution, simply because they refused to cover their heads. Their crowning glory has been as deadly as any viper's bite, because they said no to a man's dictate. And still, Eddie Izzard, you call yourself a girl. Well, fine. Fine. Take Ophelia for a moment. I shall play the role of Hamlet. Eddie Izzard, I have of late, I know not wherefore, lost all my mirth. Or perhaps we would be wiser, Eddie Izzard, to look into the grave, for neither one of us is a spring chicken. We both face that eternal darkness. Alas, poor Eddie Izzard. I knew him well, Horatio. He once did boast of harassing 3 teenage girls in a woman's washroom as he slithered from stall to stall, his fetish finally off leash and slathering for more. Eddie Izzard's Ophelia is no tender virgin floating in an emerald green pond, her face shining incandescent as a pearl in the falling dusk, her hair dotted by wildflowers. No. Eddie Izzard's Ophelia is Sunday's fish, 3 days past best, eyes as white as any clotted cream. Eddie Izzard's Ophelia bobs relentlessly in a toxic slough, his old man's flesh falling from his old man's bones. He is not surrounded by wildflowers. There are no scented rose petals, no sunny buttercups, no sacred yarrow. No, Eddie Izzard is surrounded by tangled pantyhose, empty estrogen bottles, used syringes, broken stiletto heels. And there, off in the distance, are bobbing latex breast forms being nibbled on by foolish carp who will be dead by midnight because they do not understand that what they are consuming is a man's discarded poison. It's madness. This is madness. This is an age of madness. And Shakespeare, in the play Hamlet, he took the threads of madness and twisted them with dreams to create a tapestry of tragedy. Whereas Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he used dreams the same way a woman might collect scraps of fabric to be sewn into a beautiful quilt, a quilt which might warm the world with integrity and dignity. I don't know, perhaps dreams are the realms of men. I do not have a dream. I am a woman. I have my material reality. My grandmothers were not birthing bodies. My beloved mother, not my birthing parent. Her sister, not a breeder. My cousin, not a bleeder. And her daughter, not a cervix haver. I am not a body with a vagina. And I will not lay back and take it, not for England and not for any man. I will never consent, because my no is eternal. I am making this recording today on treaty land, but I did not come to make a treaty. I came to break a treaty. In 2006, in Yogyakarta, Indonesia, a group of people gathered to create a document which would be part manifest destiny and part Bible of gender identity ideology. These series of documents force-teamed the material reality of sexual orientation with the immaterial fantasy of gender identity ideology. These dictates rewrote the English language and uncoupled women from meaning the biological sex to meaning simply an identity that anyone can change into and out of at will. Well, I did not sign this treaty, and I will not live by its dictates. This is the Wild Rose Declaration. I rebuke, refuse, and reject in its entirety the Yogyakarta principles. Men are not women, and boys are not girls. I will never consent, because my no is eternal. I make this declaration here on this day, March 9th, 2023. If I may return to Hamlet once more, I find myself thinking daily, if not hourly, of the most famous phrase from that play: to be or not to be. That is the question. To be or not to be the sex who is aborted simply because of her sex. To be or not to be the newborn girl who was murdered simply because of her sex. To be or not to be the girl who survives to age 9 when she is sold to a 60-year-old man. To be or not to be that same girl as she dies in a pool of her own blood, trying to give birth to her daughter at the age of 10. To be or not to be. Sometimes the question is overarching, but sometimes the question is minute. To be or not to be Julie Jaman. Never to swim in her local pool again. To be or not to be Cubana Angel. A woman who wanted to go to a spa and instead had to make a stand. To be or not to be Rachel Rooney, an author who wanted children to feel as if they could live in their own bodies, a whole body advocate, cancelled. There are so many names. To be or not to be the women who are shouted at when they try to use their right to free speech. To be or not to be. That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. I think it is. We must make a last stand for material reality. We must make her story I don't have all the answers, but I do have the answer to the most important question of our age. What is a woman? An adult human female.